Cooper, why are you packing your suitcase? And my suitcase? We finally moving to Scottsdale?
Nah, ya goon. We're going to Australia.
Australia? For what? We got an Outback Steakhouse just 2 blocks away.
Now, you know good and well I'm not welcome to that establishment anymore. But that's not the point. Nah, Cobb. We're finally going to see Tenet.
Oh, great. It's just another one of your schemes.
It's not a scheme, or even a misadventure. Tenet is currently playing in Australian theaters, and the reviews are in. Critics are saying it's confusing, meandering, and humorless. So now we know for sure it's going to be good.
Wow, Cooper, you thought of everything.
Come on, Cobb. Now's our chance to sneak into first class. Those seats are wide open.
But Cooper, aren't they closed for social distancing?
Ah, perfect. We've been introverts for years, so it should be great. Ah, first class. Hey, Cobb, check it out. It's John Goodman.
Cooper, you idiot. That's not John Goodman. That's Russell Crowe from Body of Lies. And he's looking right at us.
Hiya, Mr. Crowe. Are you on your way to Australia to see Tenet too?
They say there is a catalyst at the heart of the cinema experience, a social contract, a binding dynamic power that lifts the cinematic experience into a realm of intimate connection between the audience and the screen and the stars in the heavens beyond.
See, Cobb, he gets it.
They say. But who are they?
What is that music?
Some conceited, pretentious f***s who try to piss in your pocket and tell you it's raining. Well, f*** that shit.
Are you monologuing?
I got a movie coming out. It's called Unhinged. I'm not f***ing with you. It's called Unhinged. And it's going to be in cinemas. Off you go.
Wow, Cooper, I can't believe it.
I know. Who'd have thought Russell Crowe was Australian? Hey, looks like he wants to throw his phone at us.
Passengers, please fasten your seatbelts. We will land shortly.
Cooper, this is it. We're finally going to see Tenet.
And if you're listening and you're the uncomfortable-looking American squatting in first class, we must remind you that Americans are currently not allowed off of the plane and into other countries due to their failure to contain the coronavirus. Have a nice day.
Ah, son of a motherfucking goddamn shit.
Ah, great. Now we gotta go back to America and watch that weird movie Russell Crowe was talking about.
Cobb, I got an idea, but it requires you to use that fake British accent again.
Ah, no, Cooper. Don't tell me. We're not gonna.
Oh, we are. From this point forward, we're going to be British spies who...
Excuse me, gentlemen. Mr. Crowe has just informed me that you called his movie weird, and he's kindly requested you return to your seats until the plane is sent straight back to America, where you belong.
Ah, fine. But we only have one request.
Yeah, just one. Wait, what is it, Coop?
We get to watch Kissing Booth 2 for our in-flight movie.
Ah, Cooper, you know me too well. Welcome once again to Cinemaholics. I'm John Negroni, box office columnist for Adam Tickets, staff writer for The Young Folks, and head writer of Cinemaholics.com. He is a pop culture writer for Cinema Blend, and he also reviews films for Cinemaholics.com. Hey, Will Ashton.
Hello.
You can find more episodes of the show, including our full archive on Cinemaholics.com. Be sure to write into the show if you have any feedback for us, cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com. And if you are interested in supporting this podcast, you can go to our Patreon. It's at patreon.com/cinemaholics. You can learn all about becoming one of our donating supporters. Thank you to everyone who already is. We also have a new feature that we're excited to share with you all in Off Topics later, which is a new thing where you can leave us a voicemail. We'll get to that later in the show, though. For now, we have so much to get to. We have a few reviews, of course. We're going to be reviewing the new Disney Plus film, The One and Only Ivan. We also have an indie from Sundance called Tesla, and we have a YA romance, Words on Bathroom Walls. But our off-topic section has quite a few things to get to that are going to kind of balance out the show a little bit here, so let's get started. First, Extra Milestone. Our Extra Milestone classic film anniversary this week was Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which came out in 1975, so it's celebrating its 45th anniversary, and The Blues Brothers, which is celebrating, I think, so that's 1980, so that's 40 years. that episode of Extra Milestone just came out. Sam Nolan had on guest, first time Cinemaholics guest, Tyler Chambers. A lot of fun. Hope you all enjoy that journey through some comedic masterpieces, I think is fair to say, especially Monty Python. Very infectious conversation. I was very much wanting to watch both of those movies again after listening to them talk about it. But that's Extra Milestone. It's out right now. Now, we do want to get to Unhinged. You're probably wondering why it's not in the show title. And that's because neither of us was able to catch it at the drive-in theater this past weekend. For me, it's because the drive-ins, I think some drive-ins were showing it, but the time I was looking at maybe seeing it, we're dealing with like closings because in Northern California there are fires and the air outside is like very unhealthy. So it's just not a very good idea to go to a drive-in for us right now. And beyond that, I wasn't interested in Unhinged anyway. I don't really want to watch it. But Will, you were planning to see it. I think you even had tickets.
I didn't have tickets, no, but I was planning to see it yesterday, but it was raining, so the weather wasn't very cooperative, and so it didn't quite work out. But I am planning to see it some point. I don't know if it'll be this upcoming weekend or later this week, but I do want to see it just for the trashy pleasures that it might have. But I don't want to go to a regular theater to see it at this point because I don't really feel it's a safe or reasonable option right now. I don't think it's the type of film that I should risk my life or anyone else's life to see. So I'll have to wait for that one.
Agreed. Yeah, I think we're kind of in the place where we're not going to review something unless it's available at a drive-in theater. So as an option that's safe for people, that follows
or we get
movies over the next couple of weeks, or a screener. But even then, if it's either screener or only like theatrical, no drive-in, I think that we would probably have to have a conversation about not reviewing that film. But it's looking like stuff is hitting drive-ins pretty regularly now, so I think we can avoid that.
Yeah.
Now, there's another movie, Chemical Hearts, with Lily Reinhardt that just came out, and I've heard that that's okay. I haven't seen it, but that's on Amazon Prime. Yeah, neither of us saw that as well.
I think that was a Paramount film initially that they sold to Amazon, I think.
Yeah, it's getting some decent buzz, and we just didn't get to it, so that's why you're not seeing a review for it this week. Some things we have seen. Now, I've been powering through a new documentary series on Netflix called High Score, which is fantastic. I really, really want people to check this out. This is a limited documentary series that's kind of about kind of the big picture of how video games came to be and how they developed across pop culture from the late 70s all the way to the modern day. It's so much fun. There's a whole episode, for example, about how did Pac-Man come together? What is the history of Nintendo and Atari? And you get all of these amazing stories that like I had never heard before about people growing up with video games, how they came up with the inspiration of little details and things of like Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter 2. It's like so dense. Like they have a whole episode about the relationship between Dungeons and Dragons and like role-playing games as we see them today in games like Skyrim. It's just fascinating stuff, but it's also just really enjoyable. Like they put so much work and effects into making this thing really quirky and its own thing. It's not just a bunch of talking heads. Like you literally have, because you don't have footage of certain things that happen, they recreated a lot of things in like 8-bit and 16-bit animation. And it's just super fun. Like I keep saying fun because that like best sums up this series. It's probably my favorite video game documentary thing that's ever come out, which is saying a lot because Indie Game the movie is fantastic and it's kind of been like the gold standard for quite a while.
What about King of Kong?
King of Kong I haven't seen.
Really? Oh wow. I like that one a lot.
You should watch this one because I think a lot of people are saying that this is definitely like one of the ones that's going to go down as like, if you want to like get your feet wet with the history of video games, this is a really, really powerful one. It gets into Donkey Kong and it gets into like the inspiration of Kirby. I mean, this thing has so much information in it and it's kind of amazing. I've seen 5 episodes, but I've learned so much. And even the things that I already kind of knew, I'm getting like new details of that I didn't know before. And it's fascinating. I think the only criticism you could probably lobby at it is that it's going for so many different types of stories that it can be a little surface level at times. Like it doesn't go as deep as you might want it to. I'd say like the biggest complaint I'd have in that department is probably with Mortal Kombat. That kind of just brush over the controversy stuff and they don't really get into it, which kind of bummed me out. But that said, I haven't finished the whole series, so it's very possible that it does get brought up again. And they do go back and forth across time, so it's not like things get dropped and you never get back to it. But yeah, I hope people are checking out High Score on Netflix. It's one of the better things that come out on Netflix, in my opinion.
It sounds like a lot of people are watching it just from looking at the scores that they have on their website.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Something that hasn't come out yet on streaming, but is about to, is The Boys Season 2. Now, by the time we release this episode, the embargo will be up, but we are recording it the day before. So, don't tell anybody, Will. To everybody listening, this conversation we had was on the 24th. Now, sure. I'm not going to get any details. I'm not going to spoil The Boys Season 2, but I am going to say that this show is just continuing to be so surprising and so inventive and just so dark in a way that really clicks with me. If you didn't watch season 1 of The Boys, it came out on Amazon last summer, kind of like in the middle of like superhero fatigue. We had just gotten Avengers Endgame, Spider-Man Far From Home had come out. And this show is about like, what if superheroes were real and existed in our world, but they were owned by like corporations and a big like PR agency. And it's kind of making fun of the whole thing where like Superman in like the Zack Snyder universe, he kind of seems like he's sociopathic and pretending to be a Boy Scout. And it's kind of unintentional in a way because the graphic novel for The Boys came out before Man of Steel, but the show kind of takes advantage of like our current reading of superhero cinema and just really lampoons it in a way that's like really gory and full of just like really dark material that just makes it stand out. I was writing my review of this for the Spool, and I couldn't help but think like there's nothing about this show where it's like the best at anything. Like we have a masterpiece superhero show that's kind of like this. It's called Watchmen on HBO. And we've gotten plenty of shows and even movies that are sort of about like the people who don't have powers in a world where the superheroes are like abusing their power. Like that's been done. But The Boys is really special. It's like its own thing. And season 2 kind of continues what I really liked about the first season. And I hope people enjoy it as much as I did. It's just 8 episodes, and some of the episodes are like an hour long. And I'd say that like the first 2 episodes, it's kind of slow to pick back up again. And you're kind of like, all right, what is this season really going to be? Episode 3 is when it crystallizes. Like from episode 3 to episode 8, it's this series, in my opinion, at its most bingeable and addicting. I was like so hooked. I was like, I got to know what's going to happen next, because they really just go for it at that point. And it bums me out a little bit, Will, that you didn't really watch the first season because you accidentally watched the season finale because you thought it was the pilot.
Yeah.
And,
I was very confused.
Right. And there's so many, like I said before, this show is so surprising. It's so unpredictable. And there's so many things I want to talk to you about with this show, but I can't. So I hope you rectify that at some point, because I shouldn't say it, but there is a certain cameo, a voice that happens in season 2 that is just chef's kiss. One of the standout show moments of the year for me. I just really love The Boys and all of its quirky darkness and messed up juvenile humor. There's certainly some people who are going to be extremely offended by it, and that's probably why I'm such a big fan. And that's actually a pretty decent transition into an issue I had this past weekend. This past weekend, DC Fandome happened, and we got all of these trailers, all of these like superhero trailers. And because I had just watched The Boys season 2, I think something about the way that show satirizes superhero movies in particular, like the way that they're so produced, and like it takes like such precise aim. An example, for example, Avengers Endgame, the whole like A-Force thing that happens where all of like the female Avengers are in one shot kind of arbitrarily. And the show basically takes all of the piss out of that moment. And so watching these DC trailers for like the Batman and Suicide Squad and all that stuff, I can't get this show out of my head. And I'm really worried that this show has like ruined superhero movies for me. And maybe that's a reason for you not to watch it, Will, because I think you're already kind of tired of superhero movies. And I think this show would just make it worse, possibly.
I don't know. I mean, that's the thing is that like watching the trailer for the Batman, I was just like, oh yeah, this is what it's like to be excited about superhero property. I know we've had a bunch of Batman movies at this point, but I don't know. I really like that trailer. I wasn't really crazy about the other DC fandom things I saw, but I don't know. I can see what you mean.
Yeah, I gotta say, I watched all that stuff, and I wasn't that like I don't think any of the trailers look bad or anything. I kind of get why people like the Batman trailer. It's cool seeing Robert Pattinson, I guess. There was nothing about it though where I was like, wow, I've never seen a Batman movie like this. I feel like I have. As much as I like the whole idea of like a David Fincher styled Batman trailer or Batman movie, I should say. And like, yeah, Robert Pattinson looks pretty cool in it. It's kind of, I don't know. I just feel like I've seen this Batman movie before, like visually, aesthetically, and all that stuff. Like, I don't know. There's nothing about it that's really got me that excited. But what's exciting you about it?
I mean, yeah, I don't disagree with that. I don't think it's like doing anything that's like, oh wow, like this is a brand new take on the Batman lore. I mean, basically every Batman movie since Nolan has basically been like the Frank Miller version of Batman. And it's like, yeah, I mean, it's doing that again to a certain extent, but I do like that this one is going for something that seems to be intentionally kind of more grounded and gritty in a way that like compared to like the last Dark Knight movie, and then even like Batman v Superman, which is so like big and so like huge, like having it be like a real like detective story again, like because Batman, I don't know, it seems like it's kind of moved away from the whole detective angle of the character, and I like that this one is fully going into that side of it. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be like a revolution or a revelation. I mean, of the genre, the character, but I don't know. It really got me excited. I think it's a well produced trailer, and I think Matt Reeves knows what he's doing, so I'm excited.
I agree. It's funny that like we've been talking about Matt Reeves' Batman movie for literally like 4 years. Like I think it was one of the first things we talked about on Cinemaholics was this movie coming out someday. But yeah, I guess I kind of see where you're coming from. I guess I kind of make fun of sometimes people who say like, it feels like every time something comes out and Batman's in it, people are like, this understands that Batman is the world's greatest detective because he maybe does like one detective thing. And I just feel like that always gets brought up. But then with this one, yeah, you're right. It does look like it's actually the story is that he's trying to solve a mystery, and that's more of a detective thing. But at the same time, we just sort of see him beat people up. I like the idea though. Yeah. I like the idea though that they're going for.
Yeah, I mean, they've only filmed like 30% of the film, so it's like they only have so much footage at their disposal that they can actually put a trailer for. But I think it looks cool. Like, I mean, I just wanted to know that it was in good hands. I knew it was, but it was just nice to get some confirmation that it's going to be probably a cool Batman movie. Like I said, not going to like flip the lid and like reveal something that we've never seen from Batman. I think it's just going to be like a really solid, well-made Batman movie. And, I'm a sucker for Batman. I think he's fun in his own way.
The new Wonder Woman trailer looks pretty interesting. I thought the Black Adam thing was like embarrassing. It was just like, yeah, the Black Adam trailer.
I didn't see it.
It's bad. It's just like nothing. It's just like animated stills, and it's like laughable. Like at one point, you just sort of see The Rock kind of like from like a silhouette of him clearly photoshopped in from like the Fast and Furious, it looks like. Okay. And I don't know. I just was like, this isn't really a teaser. This is just like a random voiceover thing. And then also the thing I was actually excited about, because I thought the Suicide Squad roll call was a lot and not much get me excited about. Although the promo where it was like kind of behind the scenes, that was kind of cool to see like James Gunn in action.
I was actually flipped. The behind the scenes thing kind of was like whatever for me, but
really,
the roll call thing I thought was kind of fun because like I didn't know all these people were in it. I mean, I knew some.
Yeah,
of them
there's that, but I mean, for me it was overwhelming. I was just like, geez, like
really. See, I thought I don't know, because I didn't really get anything from that like behind the scenes thing that like really made it like different to me. It just seems like it's kind of going for that kind of murky aesthetic again. That was like I was hoping James Gunn would avoid this.
To me, it didn't look like that, but
I don't know. Like the costumes and stuff look all like dark red and brown and black.
I don't know. Some of the costumes are really out there though. Like
except
really
for like Polka Dot Man,
cheesy.
Yeah, I mean that stuff. Yeah, I thought that all the Polka Dot Man stuff was fun, and I really like what's his face, King Shark. The way he looks great. I'm excited about that, and I'm excited to see the film. I just didn't.
Speaking of which, I'd say the Suicide Squad. You probably didn't look into that, but the Rocksteady game where like the Suicide Squad has to like kill Superman. I thought that was really cool. I was really into that.
Yeah,
that's like, that was like so much more fun to watch than anything I saw in a trailer from DC this past weekend, to be totally honest with you. And it's the same people who made the Arkham games, so it's just neat to see like them doing something totally different. You know, like it's set in the daylight, and it's these like villainous characters instead of like a Batman adventure. I don't know. That to me felt like something different. Like felt like something we haven't really seen before. And so I'm a little bit more excited about that, to be totally honest.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, the only other thing I saw besides the Suicide Squad videos and the Batman trailer was the trailer for the Justice League Snyder Cut.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah,
which I mean, you know, I hope it's good. I mean, you know, I wasn't really a fan of Justice League, to put it mildly, so I would definitely rather see a version of Justice League that's better. But what I saw in that trailer didn't really convince me. It was like, oh, this is going to be the superior, like supreme version. Like it seems like it's going to be better. Like Ben Affleck seems more into it, but like I don't really. Nothing I saw in that trailer like blew me away per se. Like it just was like, yeah, I mean, just looks like other footage.
I wouldn't say it blew me away, but it did sort of get my hopes up a bit more.
I'm still planning to check it out.
I don't know. It was intriguing. It was a little bit more of like, it did feel like something that was kind of coming from Zack Snyder and not like a studio note written kind of amalgamation, like edited down to the bone, right? Like, I don't know. It looked like a movie. And so that's why I'm kind of like, yeah, I'll see that. Like it could be good.
Some of like the like CG stuff looked kind of like too murky for me as well. Like it looked like, I don't know, it didn't really visually appeal to me, but like all like the shots, like the football field stuff, I thought that looked great. Like your traditional kind of like Snyder slow-mo stuff. I think, you know, that's cool. Like the Casey, what's her name from Dope. She was in the trailer for a few minutes. I don't remember her from Justice League, so I'm assuming her role is going to be pretty organic to this version.
She's Iris West, right?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I remember she wasn't in the film version, so I mean that's exciting to see. But yeah, I did like that the trailer, like the way they set it up was like, you know, all the heroic big stuff, and then there's like a pause, and it seems like they're gonna lead up to like a laugh line at the end. But they're like, no jokes. We don't want anyone to think this is the Josh Whedon one. Don't end on a joke. Just end them saying, I don't know, I forget what they said, but it just seemed like it was building up.
We stand, or
something. It was like building up to like a joke, but then like someone in the editing was just like, no jokes.
Sure. Yeah, I think it looks like fun. But that was the DC Fandome event. Lots of stuff we're probably going to see for sure, including Wonder Woman, which is only a month away or so. A little over a month, but yeah. Before we get into our reviews this week, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but we have a new feature for Cinemaholics where we are now playing your voicemails on the show. So we have an account on this app called Swell. Linked to it in the show notes, of course. But all you have to do is open up this app on your phone. It works on iOS and Android. And we are leaving prompts and questions and things. And so far, we've actually gotten a lot of responses. And so we actually had to choose. I was a little worried. Well, I was like, hopefully we will get like one voicemail, maybe, right? But we actually got a really good range. And so if you don't hear your voicemail right now, we're hoping to sort of like get through a lot of them. So you'll keep trying. You'll probably show up eventually. But it was kind of hard to choose, to be totally honest. But one of the prompts we put out there, and the first one we're going to do, is what is a movie you have seen more than once in 2020? We asked all of you, all right, new, old, in between. We want to hear your picks. What's a movie you, for whatever reason, in quarantine, or even if it was like early in the year and you just revisited it in the last little while, which just a movie you've seen at least twice in 2020. It doesn't have to be a new movie. It could be, a classic movie. I certainly rewatched things quite a bit. I think I've already mentioned La Dolce Vita was one that I've seen a few times this year. But this voicemail comes to us from Joe. And please, as always, let us know your name and in the voicemail, and also where you're from. And this is what Joe had to say.
I don't really watch movies twice much anymore. And that's why this is even more embarrassing for me, because the film that I have seen twice in 2020, the Kissing Booth. And I can hear you laughing already. But look, here's what happened. So I watched it alone once. My girlfriend was out taking her niece shopping. I was laying in bed in a rainy Sunday, and I was like, what's all the fuss about? Let's see. So I watched it, and I was like, it's a typical teen, kind of rom-com-y film. And they were smart. They implemented some 80s music and they threw Molly Ringwald in there, so you lure in my demographic where we're like, it's kind of somewhat palatable, I guess. So then what happened was after I watched it, then my girlfriend wanted to watch it. I could have saved myself a viewing there. So I ended up, we were laying in bed one night. I'm drawing on the iPad. She's watching The Kissing Booth, and I kind of saw it twice. So yeah, these are my sins.
All right. Thank you, Joe, for sending us that voicemail on the Swell app. I don't know, Will, what do you think? Kissing Booth. I feel like it's a movie we've talked about, probably the movie we've talked about the most on Cinemaholics without actually watching it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like our friends Cobb and Cooper are real big fans of it, surprisingly.
That's right. Yes, I'm sure they're going to appreciate that voicemail more than anybody. Yeah.
At least Cobb will. I don't know about Cooper, but we'll see.
The next question we're going to be playing a voicemail from, we asked the listeners, what is a recent Netflix movie or show you wish more people had seen? We've already gotten some responses for this, but if you want to send us your response, you definitely still can. Just head on over to the Swell app. Again, that's on iOS and Android, and find the prompt and respond. Let us know. You just leave your voice for us, and we will maybe play it later this week or next week's show. All right, let's get into our first review of the week. Let's talk about the one and only Ivan.
Let's give him a great show, okay?
The one and only
Why do they want an angry gorilla anyway?
You're a silverback. He terrifies humans.
You're not terrifying. Who's that?
My sister.
Where's your sister now?
I don't remember.
Memories never leave us. They just get out of reach.
Whoa, did you draw all these?
A gorilla. Who draws? What is it? Don't tell me. It's a lonely haystack on a late summer day.
It's a beetle.
The one and only Ivan is a new kind of family, sort of like feel-good comedy-ish movie / drama. It's like that genre, right? It's like, it's for the kids, it's for the parents.
For kids.
Yeah, it's clean fun.
Yeah, good, clean fun.
This comes to us from Thea Shirok, who I'm not as familiar with.
She did
Me Before You.
Yeah.
That's like the only one I think I've seen. I think that's her only movie that she's directed.
I think at least her only feature film, because I know she does a lot of like British theater. I think I remember reading something about that. So she is an established director, but a pretty novice filmmaker. I
think that is the case. Yes. So The One and Only Ivan is her follow-up, her second film, and I think this was originally supposed to be shown in theaters. It was going to get a theatrical release, and it's kind of been in the works for a long time. I think we first heard about this movie back in like 2014, but then they were just late to just make it.
I know it got like pushed back a lot. Like I think there were like 2 or 3 release dates for this before it came to Disney Plus, if I remember correctly.
I believe that's the case. Yeah, they just kind of pushed this thing around until finally it's coming out now on Disney Plus. I'm not sure if it would have ever shown up in theaters, or if this was just one of those things where it's like, yeah, this works out. We need something for Disney Plus, and doesn't really make sense to put this in a drive-in right now. So here it is.
I think it might, if we didn't have COVID going on, kind of same with Artemis Fowl. I think they might have tried to push this in theaters, but I don't think they would have given it a like huge release. This might be like one of those like Labor Day weekend kind of movies where it's just like, it's out if you want to go see something, but like they're not expecting like more than 30 million at the box office. That's the vibe I get. Disney does like to release like kind of smaller, quieter August films, right? Like Queen of Katwe was one of those movies, and Pete's Dragon. Like they come out with some kind of like smaller sort of family thing where they don't really know what to do with it marketing wise, and they're just hoping that enough people see it to pay back the budget. And here it is in the last part of August. It's one of the last films of the summer. Now, the screenplay is from Mike White, who also voices one of the characters. And Mike White is a little bit more well-known, I think, to some of the listeners, I assume. He's one of my favorite writers, yeah.
Yeah, Freaks and Geeks, Dawson's Creek, Stepford Wives. I know he was in. I don't know if he like worked on it at all, but one of the movies I know that you love, Pitch Perfect 3. Joking.
That's the only one I think of his I haven't seen, if I really? Recall correctly. Yeah, I think I've even seen the Emoji Movie. So
yes, that's right. He was a writer, one of the many writers on the Emoji Movie, but also he directed Brad's Status. I think that was one of the last things.
And Year of the Dog with Molly Shannon.
Okay, yeah, I haven't seen that one. And that was his first film.
Yeah, so my favorite is probably either School of Rock or Chuck and Buck, which I've talked to you a lot about Chuck and Buck. I love that movie.
Yeah.
Not for everybody, but if you really like a kind of weird indie dark comedy, that's definitely one to check out. And he gives a great performance in that.
Now, this new movie, The One and Only Ivan, is about a group of zoo animals who they perform in kind of a small miniature circus that is inside of a mall, like a shopping mall called the Big Top Mall. And our main character is a silverback gorilla who he and the animals can talk to each other, but the humans can't understand them. It's that kind of movie, right? And the ringleader of the entire circus is named Mac. He's played by Bryan Cranston. And he and Ivan have been like kind of performing together for a long time. Ivan is voiced by Sam Rockwell. And at the beginning of the movie, we sort of get introduced to all the other animals, and they're all kind of voiced by different creatures. I got a real kick out of like the elephant being the voice of Angelina Jolie. I got like Kung Fu Panda vibes a little bit. And we have a chicken character played by Chaka Khan for some reason. And we have this cast as well. So we just got to go through it.
Yeah.
Well, because it's so random to me. But okay, so there's a stray dog named Bob, played by Danny DeVito, a poodle played by Helen Mirren. There is a baby elephant voiced by Brooklyn Prince, and then a white rabbit voiced by Ron Funches, who is I'm very curious to hear what you have to say about him in this. And then Vilpa Sue voices a parrot. Is it Funches?
I thought it was Funches. I could be wrong. I mean, you're asking.
Sure.
You're asking me. I mean, I'm never good with the names, but yeah,
I don't know for sure. But then also we mentioned Mike White, who voices the seal, and a few other actors in this as well. But those are the big ones. So the storyline is that Ivan is kind of like the headliner of this circus. This is based on not only I believe it's based on both a book and also a real life story that was turned into a book, if I'm not mistaken.
Well,
and the whole idea is that like Ivan is kind of like even though he has this like exterior of like he has to roar and be mean, and that's what gets people to come in through the door, he's actually really sensitive and he likes to draw, and he has like a softer side, and not everybody sees it. And events transpire from there. Now, I should also say this movie kind of takes place in like, it seems like the late 80s, early 90s, somewhere around then. So it's a period piece in a lot of ways. They don't explicitly say it, but you can really tell that it's kind of a different era. But all right, One and Only Ivan, what did you think of this Disney Plus movie, Will?
Yeah, I mean, well, I just checked. There was one other Mike White movie I haven't seen. It was Dead Man on Campus. That was his first film. But I've seen everything else, just to clarify, including Enlightened, which is a show I love on HBO. But anyway, to answer your question, yeah, this movie, I didn't really know what to expect going in, because like we said, from all the delays and just like the kind of Disney just dragging their feet throughout the release process for this, I was like, is this bad? Is this like, so is there something they want to hold off with this? And I think it was just because it was just a smaller film that they didn't really know if they could make their money back or not, I'm guessing. Because it's actually a pretty charming, sweet little movie. I mean, it's not something you haven't seen before. Like, a lot of the beats are very familiar. The story itself is certainly kind of following a formula you've seen for a lot of these family movies, especially ones that are based on like animals being in captivity. It does follow a lot of those tropes and a lot of those familiar formats, but the performances themselves are really quite good. I mean, I definitely think this is some of the best use of Bryan Cranston's talents that I've seen since Breaking Bad. I mean, a lot of his recent film works have been kind of pressing too hard for the hammy side of him, and I think this movie, it kind of had him play that up a little bit for the character, but it also showed his more sensitive, sweet side in a way that I liked a lot. And I also really enjoyed Sam Rockwell's performance, as well as Brooklyn Prince, certainly more so than The Turning, which was a pretty disappointing film for Brooklyn Prince as far as a follow-up to the Florida Project. But yeah, I mean, it's not one that I'm going to be like remarking upon as the years pass, or like, oh yeah, like being wistful about this film. But for the time being, as a lazy Sunday movie, I thought it was quite charming.
You know, I think I was just in the right headspace for this. We should say a really short movie, hour and 30 minutes, about an hour 35. And It's been kind of crazy in the Bay Area. I kind of mentioned before, it's just lots of fires and like the air outside is just so smoky. And so I've been kind of shut in even more than usual. And so this morning I just kind of was like, all right, time to watch this One and Only Ivan, which I didn't really know much about the story. I just kind of knew the voice cast and some of the stuff we had talked about last week. And this movie kept my attention, and it just kind of made me feel good right now at a time when I really needed it. So I agree. I think this thing is pretty charming, and I think this thing is a sweet little movie. It didn't knock my socks off or anything. I think that we can definitely remark on the things that work were a little bit more pronounced than some of the things I thought were a little whatever. For one thing, I did have that experience where I was watching the movie and I was like, is this all the movie's going to be? But then it kind of surprises you. It goes back and forth.
See, I had that reaction, but I was like, I'm glad. Like, it's just going to be this. Like, that's cool. Yeah. Like, I kind of like that it's not busy and it's not like frantic like a lot of family movies are right now, where it's like trying too hard to like do pop culture references on this. So there's like an extended fart joke, but other than that, it's a pretty kind of timeless film. Like, they don't even really make it so it's like any particular year. Like, they show like the newspaper pretty prominently and like the news in a way that kind of gives it an old fashioned feel in a good way, I felt. But yeah,
you're right. Well, I think what you're trying to say is this is this year's Joker, right?
Okay. That's I'm sure they'd be really interested to hear that comparison. The filmmakers,
I can't wait to see the pull quote for that.
Yeah, this year's Joker, Cinemaholics. Yeah, with Ivan's smiling face on the poster.
But it's like the finger paint. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just throwing that white stuff on his face, and I mean, yeah.
I really enjoyed this. It's just a sweet little unassuming contained movie. I also, Sam Rockwell and Brooklyn Prince, we've gotten so used to Sam Rockwell being these really annoying, like racist characters. It was kind of nice just seeing him be like kind of more of the mentor loner kind of character we've seen in things like Way Back. And then also it's always great to see or hear Brooklyn Prince, who really impressed us with Florida Project. And I think she's been in like a few things here and there since, but nothing that's been, I think, nearly as beloved as Florida Project.
Yeah, I think I've only seen The Turning. That's the only thing I can remember off the top of my head that I've seen her in after the Florida Project.
There's like one or two other things, that escape me that she's been a part of. But I can't say that she's somebody who we've seen her best work already. I think she's just one of the up-and-comers, period. But also Angelina Jolie produced this, and I think that like she and DeVito, I don't know, there was something I think a little bit weird about those characters, and I wish there were times when I wish like some of the characters got more and other characters got less. Like we go through like an extended part of the movie where we barely see any of the other animals, and we spend most of like the vast majority of our time with the dog, the gorilla, and the elephant. And I was like, okay, well, you have this really funny rabbit like right there who just loves being in a fire truck, and it's like the cutest thing. And Ron, I think you said Funchies. Funchies, I don't know. He really owns that like persona. I don't know. I thought Murphy the rabbit was very cute.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a good character. I just didn't really think there was as much there. I think they handled it well, because I don't know if there's really a lot there.
Probably.
As far as like, I mean, I think it's kind of like a one joke premise. And it's like same as like the chicken and the others. Like I think, like in theory, I get what you're saying, but I felt like they weren't as like dynamic as characters. They're just kind of sight gags.
That's what you mean. It would have been too busy.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So it would have been like Doolittle all over again. I just don't think it would have worked.
We do have like a cute kid and her dad, and there's some problems at home, and like typical family kids movie drama stuff. And we also have just kind of like this pretty competent writing, just sort of brings it all together. I thought I was a little worried over the course of the movie that there was sort of, I don't know, they were trying to almost make Bryan Cranston's character like too villainous when they needed him to be, or like more of an antagonist. But it was confusing. And it was also a little confusing at times of like, what is this movie really trying to say? It's trying to say something kind of deep about the difference between captivity and security. And I think they kind of nailed it, actually. Like I was worried and concerned that the movie was going to sort of end by, I don't know, just not reckoning with these like surprisingly big questions, but then it ended up being about that in a way that I thought was pretty satisfying. Of like, there should probably be like a balance between, being in a place where like you're not shut in and just like contained. And oh no, Will Ashton, is this a movie that is relevant to our current times?
Well, if it is, it seems like the message you're implying is that we need to go out more and be roaming, which would not be the good message for right now.
Just like this movie, where we're sending mixed messages, aren't we? No, I ultimately I don't think it does that. I just think to what you were saying about Cranston, I thought that it's a great performance, but I think there were times when I didn't quite get him. I don't know. I felt like something was missing with that character of just his like devotion to this big top circus. And like, there were times I was like, are we supposed to hate this guy? Or are we supposed to feel sad for him? I didn't get it.
I mean, considering this is a Disney film, I didn't expect him to be like too much one side or the other. Like, I actually kind of like that it was a little bit more varied in that respect. But I do agree that like there are times where they kind of push like he's almost kind of too manipulative or like even maybe abusive, and they like kind of push back because, like I said, it's a Disney film. It's like, well, we don't want to like send that. Like, we don't like they want you kind of like Bryan Cranston at least a little bit. So it's like they don't want to push that too far. But I don't know. I thought they handled it fairly well. I can see what you mean, but I mean, I think the point got across, like you said, so it didn't really bother me in the end.
I guess they just, they want it to be a little bit more of like, you know, not all humans are bad and they'll surprise you, and they're kind of playing up into that theme. And yeah, I guess there was never like an outright villain, which is kind of nice for a movie like this. Like, you never had a point where, you know, like the mayor would show up being like, unless your talent show raises $3,000,
shutting down the mall.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing like that.
And we're going to make an amusement park.
Yeah, it's not Dumbo. But even though there were times when I was like, oh, it kind of is.
DeVito.
I think the theatrical budget kind of made this a little bit like more impressive in terms of like the effects. I thought the effects were pretty decent.
Yeah, I thought so,
especially for Ivan.
Yeah, I mean, I thought they did a nice job. You know, you can kind of tell it's not like big budget, but like considering what the budget probably was, which is kind of more mid-budget, it was certainly impressive as far as special effects. Considering too that like the special effects are so prominent throughout the film as well. So yeah, I was impressed by those.
Yeah, agreed. I was actually really surprised, to be honest, that, you know, I was reading some of the other reviews after I watched this, and I was like, oh, this is kind of sweet, you know? It's not Paddington, but it's a fun little kids movie. And I saw a lot of negative reviews. I saw a lot of people just being like, this is tedious, and this is boring and lame, and it didn't keep my attention. And I don't know. I don't really see where those reviews are coming from. I was very curious to read them. I guess I got something out of this that, and it sounds like you did too, to an extent, that I guess other people just weren't. I think kids will like this. I think it's good.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I thought that, my other real complaint is that it's just kind of formulaic as far as its approach. But
sure.
I mean, you know, it's not done poorly. Like, it's done well. Right. And I think you can kind of tell that Mike White is here as like a writer for hire. But I do think he influences the script in a way that makes it a little bit more robust than I think maybe like a hackier version of the script would have been. Like, I think he did a nice job overall. And I do think, what's the director's name? Thea
Sharrock.
Sharrock, yeah. I thought, you know, she had a nice kind of gentle influence throughout the film. You know, it's like you said, kind of like unassuming, you know, kind of refrained in a lot of different ways that I was not expecting for a film like this, where like another director would kind of make it a little bit more like busy and like active. And I felt like this movie respected the younger audiences to just kind of let things be a little bit more casual and kind of let things play out in a more kind of progressive fashion. So yeah, I mean, I wasn't like blown away by it, but I certainly was charmed, and I found it very appealing.
You know, I was going to give this a B-, but you brought up something that, you know, I have to push the grade down a bit. It's false advertising, this movie, because you said it was formulaic. We've seen other movies like this before, so it's not the one and only Ivan.
Sure.
So that's a C- for me. Nah, I'm a B- on this one. I think it's fun.
I do think, that Neil deGrasse Tyson should have came in and been like, there's also Ivan the Terrible, Ivan Drago, Ivan Reitman, you know, just something that would have clarified that, like, he's not the one and only Ivan, you know, something that would have made things a little bit clearer in that respect. But I certainly found it very appealing. I would give it a B- myself. I thought, you know, it won't be something I'm going to like I said before, remark upon like years from now and be like, oh, you know, like that was a real like high mark for Disney. It's like a real solid kind of like B-level effort where I can kind of see like they probably didn't have their hopes up just because it's, like we said, kind of smaller and like not as busy as these other films. So maybe they just thought like kids might have been bored by it or just not as interested as they might have been, which is a shame because I think, like you were saying, like it has a little bit more trust and faith in its younger audiences to kind of, you know, have something that's a little bit more reserved and kind of more patient and kind of like letting things play out in a fairly sweet unassuming fashion. So, I'd like to see more kids films like this. I think it's nice and charming and, something that easily could be appealing to a wide audience because like none of the content's offensive. I'm pretty sure it's a G film. Like, I don't think it even pushes PG. I might be wrong about that, but
Not sure.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it might be a little PG because some of like the animal actions and stuff, but I don't know. It's a real light PG if it is. So
there's a really edgy chicken cross the road joke that I think will probably
that was
turn heads.
That might offend a few audiences in certain regions. So
all right, well, this heartwarming little flick is B- for me, B- for Will. The reviews aren't that bad. The reviews I saw were more negative, but I just looked at the Rotten Tomatoes. It's like 71%, which that sounds about right. 71% of critics at least kind of liked it, like we do. So I guess that's pretty much in line with what we're talking about. And yeah, it's kind of weird too because I feel like 2020 in general has been we've had so many reviews where it just feels like every movie or most movies are like on the edge of like they're either C+ or B-. That's like our line, I guess, of like either we recommend it as a B- or above, or we don't really recommend it as a C+ or lower. So this one's like a high B-, but I'd be curious to look at like our catalog of grades and see like how many movies have like fallen in that zone of like right at the line of like, is it okay or did you like it?
I think that's not unintentional because I think studios are just at this moment kind of throwing out the things they don't have full faith in or something that they're like, it's like maybe they're not like against it, but like, certainly like Artemis Fowl or something like that, where it's just like they had no faith in that. They knew it was bad. And it's just like, just put it on Disney Plus. But there's like exceptions, like obviously like Hamilton and things like that, where it's like they're good stuff. They just like they wanted something to kind of tide audiences during this period. But yeah, for the most part, I think it's stuff that they're just kind of like they want to get their hands off of. And yeah, I mean, it's not going to produce like B or higher level movies, but if it's stuff like this where it's just appealing but slight, I'll take it for sure.
Agreed. All right, well, that is the one and only Ivan. It is currently available to stream if you have a Disney Plus subscription. All right, our next film is a biopic about Nikola Tesla. It is called, fittingly, Tesla. Written and directed by Michael Almereyda, who is probably best known for Hamlet, which also starred the star of this movie, Ethan Hawke. Ethan Hawke plays Nikola Tesla himself. We have a narrator, Eve Hewson, who also plays Anne Morgan. We also have Kyle MacLachlan playing Thomas Edison, Jim Gaffigan playing George Westinghouse. It's quite the cast. And this is IFC Films. It is right now in a limited theatrical release. I don't know if it's in drive-ins, but it is on video on demand, so you can rent it or buy it right now for the normal price. The film is, like I said, it's about Nikola Tesla's life, but it kind of tackles more of like the middle part of his life. And we sort of see like from when he was an employee for Thomas Edison to kind of like on the outs, like kind of like at the beginning of the 20th century. So we're looking at kind of a period of time between the mid 1880s to the early 1900s. And the film catalogs really like the fall, barely rise, fall again, slight modicum of rise of Tesla and his inventions. He's best known for inventing alternating electrical currents. And his big issue in history is that he never really got credit for a lot of the things that he inspired the invention of, including the radio, for example. The film, of course, touches on that. It touches on his rivalry with Thomas Edison in terms of patents and being able to get government and investor backing on all of his projects. And the movie kind of examines a person who, some people kind of refer to Tesla as kind of just like this brilliant underdog, this guy who really got screwed over. This movie is kind of interesting because it tackles the sort of darker side of who Tesla apparently was. He was a bit of a recluse. He was very antisocial. His entire life was his inventions. And there's a dark, kind of complicated story to what this guy went through. And that's something this movie certainly has on its mind. The other thing it has on its mind is how do we make this not a boring biopic, and kind of doing everything possible to sort of like flash up the cinematography and filmmaking style to make it look like something very different than what you would expect from something like this. We've already gotten The Current War, which is a little bit more of a straightforward biographical film. And this one is just a lot weirder. There are certain scenes where you see like the backdrop of like it's clearly like a soundstage, and they're like purposely making it look like a Nostalgia Critic sketch. Like it's that kind of like production quality.
It's not really fair to Michael.
I'm sorry, but that's just kind of how I felt. Like literally,
I got more of a play vibe. Like
there's such a
like,
green screen vibe to it.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying, but like to me, like kind of the use of like kind of like drawn backgrounds and stuff like that. Like I got more of like a play vibe, like something like kind of more theatrical in that sense. But yeah, there are a couple of shots where it's like very like clearly green screen in a way that was like, oh, okay, well, I mean, I guess this is more of an aesthetic thing, or else the budget really ran out in this shot.
There's a lot of like contextualizing and breaking the fourth wall. I mentioned that Eve Hewson, who plays Anne Morgan, narrates the film. There are times when she literally stops the film in its tracks and is like, hey, let's do a Google search of Nikola Tesla. You know, it's just kind of like putting in all of these asides. Like it's like the movie is constantly trying to assure you that you are going to learn something about Tesla that maybe you didn't know before. I guess ultimately I was just a little disappointed by this movie. I just didn't find any of its quirks all that electric, I guess, to be that annoying pun person. I don't know. There was nothing about this movie that really just made me feel like it was worth the experience. It was just kind of like a ho-hum trying to be creative. But to me, it just looked like they were trying to cover up for a very, very low budget. So, but what did you think of this movie, Will?
Yeah, I'm kind of on the fence about it. I just watched it a couple hours ago, so it's still fresh in my mind. I mean, you didn't see the current war, right?
I did not.
Yeah, I was going to say. I mean, I knew we talked about it, or I talked about it, but I thought I didn't. You hadn't seen it. But, I mean, it's hard not to compare it to that since that just came out like a year or so ago. And I do believe that film's kind of trying to do something pretty similar where like the cinematography was super flashy and the editing was obviously trying to make it a little bit more modern. And I think this one, it does it in ways that I think when it works, it really works well in a way that like I didn't find those choices to be super gimmicky because a lot of them were trying to express something that's, you know, obvious, but it kind of works for this project, which is like obviously he's ahead of his time, like thinking beyond like the confines of his time and what's available for him in like the early like 1900s or 1900 or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, I think in that sense, like it makes sense. It's a little on the nose, but I mean, I admire it for trying that. And if anything, I kind of wish it had more of those choices because I could see some audiences being like, oh, like Thomas Edison's pulling out a smartphone or like, you know, Nikola Tesla is like singing karaoke now. And it's like, those choices are weird and they take people out of it. But for me, like those choices are like, oh, okay, this is kind of drawing me in because it's like, this is a little bit different. It kind of gives it a little bit of a flash, a little bit something that like makes it stand out compared to other biopics. But I think it helps and hurts the project at the same time because it's like those scenes stand out so well to the point where like the kind of more traditional biopic stuff kind of feels a little bit flatter and feels a little bit, you know, like it doesn't have the same spark, I guess, as those other moments where it clearly feels like the director is kind of trying to do something a little bit more playful, a little bit more intriguing. And yeah, like you said, the budget in this is I didn't really realize that going in, but it definitely feels apparent. And in a way that like you don't really want to criticize it too much because it's like, you know, it's a labor of love. And I imagine like, you know, he put whatever money he had into the movie. So it's not like I think he like was trying to make it look cheap. I think it's just kind of like a side project of what he was going for. But I mean, it does unfortunately kind of give a like drunk history kind of feel at times because it clearly is like a bunch of sets and, you know, like we'll have like Jim Gaffigan be George Westinghouse. And I thought he did a fine job, but like it's a little jarring at first to be like, okay, that's not Jim Gaffigan, that's George Westinghouse.
Yeah.
And, you know, like a couple other comedic actors kind of pop in a way that, you know, kind of gives that drunk history feel, but I don't think it's intentional. But it does kind of make it a little harder to get into the project and a little bit harder to kind of take it on its own terms and not look at it as like a movie or like something that's like trying to do a narrative dramatization of the story. And so I think that was my issue throughout the film was that like I admire these choices throughout. Like that's the main thing I felt was like I really appreciate what the movie's doing. I really like that he's trying to do something that's a little bit more off the cuff, but like a lot of these choices ultimately don't fully invest me into the story in a way that I felt like I could really grapple with like what's going on here and really relate to Tesla. Even though I do find this to be a pretty personal film for the filmmaker, it seems like Tesla's like troubled to earn funding or like kind of like get his ideas off the ground through like money. It seems like that's very much like a like autobiographical thing for the filmmaker. I mean, I haven't seen his other films, but that's just from what I've read and from what I've seen, that seems to be a pretty autobiographical choice for the film. And I like that. And I think that's an interesting idea. But yeah, like you, I find myself kind of on the fence as far as how successful I ultimately think it is.
I did see one of his last films, Marjorie Prime, And yeah, kind of like that. This movie, yeah. I think it's hard to make this particular criticism because Almereyda has worked on so many films, but this reminds me of the old adage of like, you can't break the rules until you know what the rules are. And it just feels like this film breaks rules for the sake of it and not really in a way that aids the story or advances the story. It just feels like it breaks rules to sort of get your attention, which I guess is a version of what you're saying.
I agree and don't.
Well, here's an example. This is the example that I used for my review for the young folks.
Okay.
There's a whole thing where we get introduced to Jim Gaffigan's character, where he's George Westinghouse, and the whole point of this character, like what makes this character interesting, is there's a paradox to him that he's a businessman and he's an inventor. But instead of letting the movie reveal that like weird personality through Jim Gaffigan's performance, it kind of just does all of the work at you right before you meet him. And it's like, it just does like a bunch of like vignettes of who this guy is, instead of just letting you naturally, organically experience this larger than life persona. So that's what I kind of mean. It's like, it's trying to like, hey, don't get bored. I'm going to explain this. Don't worry. It's like kind of like doing the Adam McKay and The Big Short thing where we're like, we got to stop the movie in order to get something across. And that's the thing that like was jarring to me. And it was just like, I don't like it when you do this. Just let the story speak for itself.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess that's where I kind of agree and disagree in that. Like, yeah, I felt like those choices, they prevented me from really getting invested in the story because the movie's constantly taking you out to like explain things. I agree with you in that respect. Like, I get that the movie is like constantly kind of doing like different things to push itself away from your traditional biopic format to the point where it does kind of make the actual biopic stuff feel a little bit more artificial as a result. But I do think that the filmmaker knows what he's doing here more than you suggest. Like, I think those choices are very meticulous. Like, I think this is a project that's been in the works since like the 80s or so. And I think it was actually the first screenplay that he wrote. So it's like one that he's been tinkering with for a long time. And I think he put a lot of thought and a lot of creative energy into this. I just think that maybe because he's been sitting on it for so long or been working on it for so many years that like maybe it got a little overcooked in the process. Like maybe there's just so many things he was trying to do in such a short span of time that it didn't really fully communicate in a way that made it organic to the story. That's just my read of it, at least.
I think this is honestly one of the rare times where I think the ending of the movie is the best part of it. I think that once you get to like the tennis court scene and this whole extended sequence featuring just like totally anachronistic Ethan Hawke just kind of going for it, all of that stuff was where I was like, see, this is subverting the biopic format in a way that I can connect. I can invest in the story through scenes like this. And it was the only time in the movie where I fully was able to do that. It sounds like there were a few times you were able to do it, but yeah, for me, it was probably a little bit more limited. I'm not sure.
I mean, yeah, it was real back and forth. Like, I think there's something to like the rollerblading scene, for instance, that's like kind of oddly charming in a way. Yeah, the ice cream stuff was fine. I wasn't really as crazy about that, but I appreciated from the onset just being like, oh yeah, okay, just so you know, we're gonna be a little weird with this. But yeah, like, or the like the pie eating scene, like that stuff. Like, I think those moments stand out to me more on reflection than your kind of more traditional biopic elements, in a way that like those scenes kind of felt so traditional against the other parts of the film that they had a more artificial feel to it. Like I was saying, in a way that was like, it just kind of took me out of it in a way that I wasn't fully able to invest in the film, unfortunately. But like I said, I appreciate everything that he's doing. I think there's a lot of interesting ideas here. And I think he has a lot of reverence for Tesla and he puts a lot of himself into this project in a way that makes it stand out compared to a kind of more, I guess, ho-hum biopic. But in the end, I just don't really think it connected with me as much as it did with some audiences that really enjoyed this thing.
I think this movie, it's so close to me being like, yes, and it did it. And we had a Tesla movie that I can be like, this is the Tesla movie you should watch. But yeah, not quite for me. I think this is like a C+. Like you, I do admire the effort. I admire swinging for the fences and just trying to do different things, not trying to do the same old biopic thing. But unfortunately, this just wasn't a movie that I thought did it as effectively as I think it could have. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of sad. It kind of like mirrors Tesla himself. I think that's pretty readily apparent to me that you can make a lot of comparisons between this movie and the person, which maybe that's sort of the point. I don't know. But yeah, C+ for me. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I land somewhere close to where he did with The Current War, which is a film I remember thinking like, this is almost there. Like, it's like a lot of the elements are working. Some scenes are fantastic. It just like the product itself in that case was like super messy, and I felt like it just didn't really come together in a way that I felt was worthy of all the passion and inspiration that went to the filmmaking of it. And this one, I'm similar but different. I'm like, I think it's a little bit more well-rounded. Like, I think the story itself is fine. I just think it just doesn't really indulge its weird side as much as I was hoping it would. Like, it does to a decent extent, to the point where it's like there's a lot of memorable scenes and a lot of things that I think will make this fresher on my mind than some other biopics I've seen of late that don't really try to do as many experimental things. But in the end, similar to you, I don't know if the choices themselves work as much as the filmmaker hoped they did. And I guess compared to some audiences, as much as some other people thought it did. So I'm really between a C+, a high C+, and a low B-. I think at this point, I'll give it a super low B- with the caveat that the grade could change by next week to a C+.
You're breaking your system, Will. I don't know. I'm getting scared. You're scaring me again.
I try and mix it up. I'm like the filmmaker here. I try to do something a little different each time.
I appreciate that. All right. Well, sort of a high-ish C+ for me, low B- for Will. It's just, it's really on the line there. I do recommend this to a lot of our listeners who are sort of completists, who are film buffs. Maybe you really like Ethan Hawke and First Reformed and a lot of his more indie performances. Yeah. I think it is worth watching just sort of as like an experimentation effort.
Yeah, I will say though that like if you're watching the trailer for this and you're like, wow, this is really whizzy, it's like doing something that's going to be revolutionary. Just keep in mind that a lot of the like kind of more experimental stuff is in the trailer. Like I watched the trailer after I saw the movie. And I was like, they kind of gave away a lot more things than I anticipated.
I never saw the trailer, so yeah, I didn't.
I'll just give that caveat real quick, I guess. But I would recommend overall. Like I said, I think it's interesting enough that like if you think it's your thing, check it out because it might very well work for you as it did for a lot of people. But I still find myself with a couple caveats myself.
So this next movie it's kind of funny because this next movie sounds pretty serious. Best reviews of what we've talked about this week, even though it has fewer reviews counted to be technical in terms of one of only 5 in, I should say. And it's also the longest. This movie is 111 minutes long. And I know, listener, I know what you're thinking. Wait a minute.
2
that
hours.
Must mean Will Ashton didn't watch it. And you're right. Will did not watch this movie. I watched Words on Bathroom Walls.
To be fair, I reached out to you and was like, hey, is there a chance I could see this film? Because I was interested. Yeah.
The screener expired. I would have sent it to you.
Yeah, you were like, the time had passed. And it's like, okay. So it wasn't like I had the chance to see it.
Yeah.
And it went away. I was willing to check it out and it just didn't work out. So you saw and I didn't.
That's right. So I was going to say that, Will. I wasn't going to fully throw you under the bus. I was just going to have a little fun. But yes, this movie is currently only playing in drive-in theaters and limited release. It's not available on VOD last I checked. So it's a little tougher to get to. But I did see a screener. So I mentioned on the show before already, but yeah, I did watch Words on Bathroom Walls a while back. And the reason was because they moved the embargo. It was actually supposed to release a bit sooner, and so I'd already seen it and done the review and everything, but then we found out no, the embargo got pushed, and so now we're talking about it. And I did a written review for this on Cinemaholics.com, but just to sort of like recap, this new movie is directed by Thor Freudenthal, who you would probably remember from Diary of a Wimpy Kid and Percy Jackson 2, The Sea of Monsters. Probably butchering the name of that movie, but you kind of get the idea. And so this movie is kind of like taking the teenage coming of age drama and, the kind of thing that's like based on a book. In this case, Words on Bathroom Walls by Julia Walton, where you have like the sort of Fault in Our Stars, 5 feet apart kind of dynamic where people fall in love. But the problem is the teenager has a condition that prevents him from being quote unquote normal. And that teenager is named Adam, who is played by Charlie Plummer, we remember from Lean on Pete, All the Money in the World. And he sort of has an issue where he gets kicked out of school because he's been diagnosed with schizophrenia. And he has an episode where he accidentally hurts another student. So he has to start going to a Catholic school. And he kind of sparks like a potential relationship with one of the girls at school played by Taylor Russell. Now, there's this whole romance thing with them. And the first thing I'm going to say is like, no, this is not as good as the romance in Waves that we get with Taylor Russell, but it is very similar. but it's similar to a fault, because if you watched Waves, you might have a hard time believing this relationship, because it's just weird, because there are so many red flags that Taylor Russell's character gets without knowing that he has schizophrenia. So he's hiding it, but then he does terrible things to her, but then she doesn't know why. And yet she still loves him. And there's certain things that happen that I think are probably more elegantly handled in the book. But that is like the big criticism of this movie. Basically everything else is pretty decent. I actually think this movie is a positive thing for the mental health community, for people who are diagnosed with schizophrenia and who are probably sick and tired of movies and TV shows always portraying them as like dangerous criminals. And it does that. It does tell a new kind of story of a person who has this condition without sort of like skirting around the limitations and the difficulties of it, and how you watch Charlie Plummer's character Adam struggle with how, if I take my medication, like there are actual trade-offs. Like it doesn't solve all my problems. Love doesn't solve all my problems. Like I still have to figure out how to deal with this thing. And then you also have some drama where his mom, played by Molly Parker, starts dating this guy played by Walton Goggins, and he feels like she's trying to start like a new family without him. And all the while, his schizophrenia manifests in a very cinematic way, in a sense where the voices he hears show up as real people. And the movie sort of addresses that this is a very unique thing. So you'll probably remember, speaking of Russell Crowe, like A Beautiful Mind, that kind of thing. And these characters, one of them is played by Anna Sophia Robb, for example. There's a few others that you might recognize from movies here and there. I didn't remember off the top of my head, but I think one of them was Devin Bostick, who some people might remember from The Diary of a Wimpy Kid. I think the first, second, and he plays Roderick. I don't know which ones he was in, but yeah, he's in this. But anyway, we also have Andy Garcia, who plays a priest who sort of like tries to help Adam, but he's kind of like, he's also in the dark. And he sort of gives out platitudes. So this movie is also kind of about like how religion can kind of like be a factor in the difficulties that like teenagers have when they sort of reach this like existential part of their lives where they have to reckon with, how complicated and messy life is and how adults are always going to let them down, with sort of the black and white teaching of religion. I think that's where this movie is probably at its strongest, is the cinematography and the storytelling, just through like the way it portrays the Catholic Church in a way to tell a story about how there are no easy answers, even though religion is sort of something that at first glance is like, well, there's easy answers. You just have to, be a Christian and then everything's going to work out. But then it's sort of being like, no, that's not, really what the gist of life is. There's a lot more to it than that. I'm not saying that that's like what Christians profess, but it can sort of be how it's perceived by some people. And so that's something I really appreciate about this movie, is it gets that point across in a way that's not super in your face. And if the romance was just a little bit stronger, if we hadn't seen a much stronger, more believable and natural romance grow out of like teenagers dealing with like really deep-seated traumas in a movie like Waves, then I would probably be way more into this. But as it stands, I think that's it is pretty decent. And I was a fan of a lot of it. I was actually impressed too by the music. Chainsmokers and Andrew Hollander did the music. And when they were bragging about that in the trailer, that was a huge red flag. So I was like, if your movie is bragging about music being composed by the Chainsmokers, who by the way, have never composed a film score before, this is their first one. That kind of was like, they're bragging about that. That could be a bad sign. But my skepticism was misplaced. It's actually a pretty decent soundtrack, and I think the Chainsmokers actually do pretty well here. I think it was a good fit for them to sort of like infuse music that I shouldn't say that like I know what the kids are listening to. So maybe to like actual teenagers, they'd be like, this is pretty dumb. This is like, boomer music or something. I don't know. Maybe they'll hate it. But I know for me, it came off to me as, if not authentic, fitting, based on my read of how high school is these days, which is probably very limited. But anyway, words on bathroom walls. I think it's a decent watch. It was on VOD. I would readily recommend it, but I definitely do not recommend risking your life or the life of other people to go see this in a theater. That is certainly not what you should do. Wait until it's either at a drive-in, or you can check it out on demand if you're interested. And unless you're one of our international friends where your theaters are open, and I'm mainly talking to Americans here, and if you're in a country where it's unsafe to be in like indoor spaces, I know there's a few around the world, but not many. And other than that, I think you should be good to check this out. But again, it is pretty long, 111 minutes. Probably didn't need to be that long. Probably could have been a little bit leaner, but it's not too bad. I wasn't. There was no point in this movie where I was really taken out of it and like, can they just finish this already? I was pretty much with it the whole time. So that's Words on Bathroom Walls. I'm actually like a really low B on it. I'm probably going to go actually with like a high B minus. I think that it's almost in the B territory, but I do have to knock it a bit for the romance, just not really being up to par. And I think that will get in the way of some people who might enjoy this. And I should say, there could be some people who watch this and they don't appreciate the way that it tackles mental illness. I really can only speak from my pretty limited perspective. I don't know if it's really portraying this in a way that will actually resonate with people. So my grade is kind of tentative right now. I do want to read up on what other critics are saying about it. I haven't seen any yet from people who might be able to watch this with like that in mind, to be like, hey, maybe it does a good job of this, maybe it doesn't. I'm not aware as of right now. But right now on Rotten Tomatoes, it's at 82%. So pretty high average among people who watched it. Only 44 reviews though, from what I'm seeing right now. So not a bad movie to check out during quarantine. And Will, I won't say that it's like a must watch for you, but if you do check it out, I would be curious to see what you think.
I mean, I do think Charlie Plummer is a pretty talented young actor, and I haven't seen everything he's done, but the things I have seen him in, he does seem to be a pretty genuine and natural actor in a way that I really appreciate. So, I'm not opposed to it. Like I said, if I had access to a screener, I probably would have checked it out.
Okay.
But alas, that wasn't in the cards for me.
There's somebody who looked out for you, and
yeah. I don't think it's like something it would have been like for me to begin with, but I am glad that it exists. It seems like it'll hopefully do some good. So I'm glad to hear that.
All right. That'll do it for this week's show. Next week, here's what we got on the line. Now, Tenet, as our friends Cobb and Cooper already talked about, it's already going to be playing internationally in a few countries overseas, including Australia.
It's already in Australia, right?
I think it expands its release on the 26th, if I'm not mistaken. So it's going to be hitting a lot more countries, but it's not going to be in the US quite yet. It's going to be a while before we're going to be able to review Tenet. So apologies for our listeners overseas. You're going to have to wait a little while to hear what we have to say, but I'm sure there are, of course, plenty of other outlets that will have access to it before we do.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? I mean, they might, push the release date back even farther for all we know.
Who knows?
Yeah,
I think it'll at least hit the drive-in. I'm fairly confident that is going to happen. I think they are setting the dates at this point. But on that note, same thing goes for The New Mutants, which is going to be in the drive-in theaters in Northern California, at least, and all over the country, really. That is finally the X-Men movie to end all X-Men movies, and I just mean that literally, to be honest. 20th Century Studios. This is the contractual obligation film that they couldn't just put on Disney Plus because lawyers. And it's like a horror film that includes like the Marvel X-Men characters known as the New Mutants. Some of them you probably don't know unless you read the comics. And it's a cast of characters who look way younger than they actually are right now, because this movie was made a long time ago and it kept getting pushed and pushed and pushed. The Disney Fox merger is to blame for that, but also because I don't think either studio really had a lot of faith in this. And I have seen the first 5
Disney
minutes, which is on YouTube.
Oh, okay. I said Disney certainly doesn't have any faith in this. I can't speak for 20th Century Fox.
Yeah, I don't think they had a ton of faith in it either, but that is a harder thing to say. Now, this was directed by Josh Boone. We'll hopefully be able to talk about it next week, assuming our screenings actually happen. I don't know because of the fires if our drive-ins are going to be open, but we'll see. Hopefully, at least one of us will be able to check it out, because Maisie Williams, Anya Taylor-Joy, Charlie Heaton, Alice Braga, Henry Zaga, Blue Hunt, quite a ragtag group of kids.
Yeah, I mean, I think either way, though, we will be able to talk about the next film that you're going to talk about. If New Mutants doesn't end up being our feature review, then the next one certainly will.
Most likely, yes.
Yeah.
The other film that is definitely on our radar that we are looking to see is Bill and Ted Face the Music. This is going to be hitting VOD this weekend. This is the third Bill and Ted film, long awaited.
Yeah.
I think it'll be in some theaters as well, but some drive-in theaters. But I haven't seen any showtimes, so at least not in this area yet. Now, this is a sequel, of course, to Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, which was a whopping 30-ish years ago, almost 30 years ago. And we're going to see Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves reprise their roles. They're back, and I'm super excited. I've always really loved these movies, and I love the cast that they have, like the newcomers. They have like Samara Weaving, for example, Jillian Bell. There's also like Kid Cudi is apparently in this, and Jayma Mays, Anthony Carrigan. It's a crazy cast. So I'm looking forward to seeing Bill and Ted finally face the music.
Yeah, I mean, I think they nailed the casting for sure with the newcomer. So I'm excited for sure.
There's also personal history of David Copperfield. We will for sure be talking about this one. We both have a screener for it, so we're going to be seeing it this week. This is coming from Searchlight, which is weird because it's like Searchlight and 20th Century were both Fox studios, and now they have like the same thing is kind of coming. Now, this was supposed to be in theaters, and I think it is in a limited release, but I don't know if it's at drive-ins. I definitely don't think it's on demand.
No, I think it's just going to select theaters, if I'm not mistaken.
This is the new film written and directed by Armando Iannucci, his follow-up to Death of Stalin, and it's based on David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, which is like, I don't know, 170 years old or something like that. Dev Patel is the main actor, but we also have Daisy May Cooper, Hugh Laurie, Tilda Swinton, Ben Whishaw, Paul Whitehouse, great cast. This premiered at TIFF last year, and I'm pretty excited about it. I've been looking forward to this one for quite a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely really enjoyed Death of Stalin, and I really like the thick of it and In the Loop, so I'm excited for this.
Rushed through the last few of these, but we do have a new Netflix movie. It's like a documentary called Rising Phoenix, which is about the history of the Paralympic Games. And then there's going to be 2 new video-on-demand films, one from Lionsgate, which is called Rogue, which is an action film starring Megan Fox, and then Centigrade, which is IFC Midnight. And that's a survivor thriller film that I don't really honestly know much about it, except that it's directed by Brendan Walsh, and people are in it who I don't know a lot of them. I think I know Genesis Rodriguez, but that's about it. So two indie films are going to be coming out as well. I don't know if either of us are going to be able to catch them.
Yeah, and I also know, I know this was, I'm only bringing this up because I think a commenter brought it up, but Mathis and Maxine is hitting Mubi on Friday as well. So
on Friday, really?
Yeah, so I don't know if they're going to do that thing where it's like free on Friday or whatever, or they'll just have it available through the service. But either way, I'll definitely try to check that one out to talk about. So,
as always, there's plenty of other things that are to be coming out that we're not even aware of or we're forgetting. But until then, we will see you on the main show, hopefully with some fresh reviews for you all. Keep an ear out for Extra Milestone this coming week. It's going to be a good one with Jason Reed. Can't wait for you all to hear that one. It's going to be a good time, of course. From the Internet California, I am John Negroni.
And from the Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Will Ashton.
See you next time.